Windows 11, the best Windows ever for gaming. Is that actually true? Today, we're going to take a look at it. Stay tuned. They can't be serious, right? So if you've been paying attention, you've probably heard that Windows 11 is the best Windows yet for gaming. And you've probably also heard that your games can be slowed down by 20% in Windows 11. Well, I'm here to tell you right now that both of those claims are not true. However, we're going to actually look at how Windows 11 performs in games. We're going to cut out all of the marketing propaganda and all of the straight up BS. And we're going to look at how it actually performs. Now, to be fair, Windows 11 came out with some pretty major bugs, especially if you use AMD Ryzen processor. One of the bugs were that Microsoft actually released it initially with a major problem with the L3 cache in the Ryzen processors. Then, when they went to update to fix that bug, they actually ended up making it worse. However, luckily, another update recently came out to fix the problem, and it looks like the fix is actually holding pretty well. Also, Windows 11 was designed with the new Intel Alder Lake processor in mind, and the scheduling has been changed in how it uses multi-core processors. Now, unfortunately, this affected Ryzen in a pretty negative way, and most of the problem was that Microsoft simply didn't work with AMD when they were developing Windows 11 in the first place, and honestly, that concerns me a little bit, especially since these problems surfaced really quick after the release, and this is something that could have been solved prior to Windows 11 being released. However, the problem is that if you're using a Ryzen 9 processor, the way that the operating system schedules the use of cores, it will actually cause a major latency problem with Ryzen 9s. The reason why this is a problem is because the Ryzen 9 chips actually use two chiplets instead of one. The Ryzen 7 and the Ryzen 5, they pretty much just use the one chiplet design. The Ryzen 9 uses two chiplets in order to get the number of cores that they have. And these chiplets actually have to communicate through a bus between each other. And by spreading out the use of all these cores, Windows 11 caused a latency problem between the two chiplets. However, AMD has fixed that problem with their latest chipset driver, so that shouldn't be an issue either now. So now we actually have a stable platform with AMD with no bugs, well, at least no bugs that we've noticed so far. And we can actually take a look at it and see how it performs compared to Windows 10. Now, one of the issues that a lot of people have been reporting is with Windows 11, they use a virtualization-based security. Essentially what this is it takes an application and it virtualizes it rather than running it on the bare hardware. And this is for security reasons so that the application cannot interact with other applications that are currently running on the system. This sounds like a great plan. However, when you need every ounce of performance to be dedicated to what you're doing in playing a game, that could actually come at a pretty big cost. And unfortunately, it actually does cause a pretty big issue. And we're going to look at that in our benchmarks. So we're going to compare Windows 11 with Windows 10, and we're going to compare Windows 11 with VBS turned on or off. And I'll actually show you at the end of the video how to turn it off. It's honestly not really that hard. Now, one quick note that I want to make before we get into the benchmarks is that I used a lot more benchmarks in this video than I typically do. And that's because I wanted to test the difference between Windows 10 and Windows 11 with the widest range of genres that I possibly could. So I added first-person shooters, racing game, a couple open world simulators, and then some other games too, to be able to get the best picture that we possibly can between the performance difference between Windows 10 and Windows 11 when it comes to gaming. So without further ado, let's get to the benchmarks and see how it did. The first game we're going to look at today is Black Mesa. Now, in Black Mesa, in Windows 10, we got an average FPS of 216.8. Now with Windows 11, without VBS turned on, we got an average FPS of 216.3. Now this is less than 1% difference. It's practically the same. So it's well within margin of error. And then once we actually turned VBS on, we got an average FPS of 213.4. This is a drop in FPS of 1.3%. It was precisely 2.9 FPS lower with VBS turned on. And honestly, this is unrecognizable, especially since we're talking about over 200 frames a second here. So you'd never even be able to tell a 1.3% difference. So this is honestly really still within margin of error. Next game we're looking at today is CSGO. Now, CSGO is the one that had the biggest difference in the other testing that's been done. Supposedly, some people saw up to a 20% drop in performance with VBS with this one. So let's start out with, in Windows 10, we got an average FPS of 237.6. Now, in Windows 11, without VBS, we got 236.0. And this is well within margin of error, so it performed about the same. However, once we turned VBS on, we got an average FPS of 218.1. Now this is a pretty big drop. This is a 7.9% drop in FPS. It's 17.9 frames a second difference. So there was a really big difference in CSGO. Is it 20%? Well, depending on your hardware, you might see a bigger difference than I saw here. But 8% drop in performance, it's pretty substantial actually. Next game we're looking at today is GTA 5. Now, GTA 5 is an open world game, so I think this game is going to be more susceptible to issues when it comes to processor performance. So to start out with Windows 10, we got an average FPS of 125. However, once we upgraded to Windows 11, we got an average FPS of 126. So honestly, it really wasn't that big a difference. It was, pretty much within margin of error. However, once we enabled VBS, GTA 5 dropped by 5% to 119.9. Now, this is only 6.1 FPS. However, a 5% drop by just turning on VBS, that's pretty considerable actually. So I'd have to say, in this case, it is a noticeable difference. The next game we're looking at today is Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, with Red Dead Redemption 2, just like GTA, it's an open world game. However, it's a lot more resource intensive. So I think honestly, this game's going to come down to the GPU is going to be what holds this back. So I don't think there's going to be that big of a difference. And to start out with, in Windows 10, we got 61.2 FPS as average frames per second. And then once upgrading to Windows 11 without VBS turned on, we got 61.9. So we got a little bit of a boost, at least a little bit of a boost within margin of error. So it's not too much to brag about. However, once we turned on VBS, this is interesting actually. We actually got another little boost. We got it up to 62.2 FPS, which again is still within margin of error. It's only a difference of between about 0.5%. So honestly, it doesn't seem like VBS affects this game at all. However, we did consistently stay over 60 frames a second, so the game was playable whether it be Windows 10, 11, or with VBS on or off. The next game we're going to look at is Dirt Rally 2. Now with Dirt Rally 2, I just added this one. This is the first time I'm using this one in a benchmark, but being that we were testing VBS, I wanted to have more of a diverse set of games that we could actually use and see how VBS affected them. So to start out with Windows 10, we got an average FPS of 143.7. Now, once we upgraded to Windows 11, it jumped our FPS up to 144.4. So we got a little bit of a boost here. At least, again, a boost within margin of error because this was less than 1% difference. However, once we enabled VBS, we actually did get a drop, but it was only by about 0.5% at 143.8. So honestly, it really wasn't that big of a difference, and it doesn't look like VBS really affected the frames per second on this game specifically. So if you like Dirt Rally 2, then it doesn't look like it really matters if you have VBS on or off. For that matter, it doesn't really matter if you're running Windows 10 or 11 either. The next game we're looking at today is Deliver Us the Moon. The results from this game were a little interesting. In fact, I was debating whether I was even going to include this game in the benchmark results. However, once I actually sat down and looked at the results on this, I thought I had to share it, not for VBS, because honestly, this game actually had some other issues that are kind of hard to explain. First off, in Windows 10, we scored 141.1 FPS. And you know, that's pretty good. It's a very playable game. However, once upgrading to Windows 11, that dropped down to 121.6. That's a 14.8% loss in FPS just from upgrading to Windows 11. That's 19.5 FPS. And honestly, I don't know how to explain this. There must be some difference between Windows 10 and 11 that's affecting this game. However, with that in mind, once we enabled VBS, we only really got a 0.5% drop in FPS. It clocked in at 121.0, so we lost a whole 0.6 FPS. So since that's well within margin of error, you know, you really can't complain. So even at 120 frames a second, the game is still completely playable. However, it was interesting that we got such a dramatic drop between Windows 10 and 11. The next game we're looking at today is Shadow of the Tomb Raider. This has always been a favorite game of mine, and I've been leaving it out of videos lately. Since I wanted to throw every game I could think of at this video, I figured I might as well throw this one back in. So to start out with, in Windows 10, we got 83.9 FPS, which is pretty respectable for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And once we upgraded to Windows 11, you know, we got exactly the same thing, 83.9 FPS. So there's absolutely no change in performance whatsoever between Windows 10 and 11. The game ran exactly the same. However, once I enabled VBS, we actually got a little bit of a boost. Well, I don't know if I called it a little bit of a boost. We actually got an average FPS of 84. So it was a boost of 0.1 FPS, and it is well within margin of error. However, our average FPS and even our 1% low stayed up pretty high, so I don't think this is actually going to affect gameplay, and I think if you like this game, you still should be able to play it in Windows 11. And for this matter, you should be able to play it with VBS on or off. So, as you can see from the benchmarks, Windows 11 is not the best Windows ever for gaming, but it's not the worst either. In fact, it really doesn't make that big of a difference. I mean, like I've been saying from the beginning, Windows 11 really is Windows 10 with a new coat of paint. It performed exactly the same across the board, except of course for Deliver Us the Moon. And you know, I actually kind of think that was a problem with the game itself. I don't think that was related to Windows, but who knows? So Windows 11 really isn't bad for gaming. In fact, it's just as good for gaming as Windows 10 is. However, there has been a lot of people that have seen major performance issues with Windows 10. And as you can see, with VBS turned on, we saw some too. In fact, especially in CSGO, the performance was actually a pretty substantial drop. So it's definitely worth turning off VBS if you want to play games. At least you want to have the full resources of your system towards playing games. Now, this is going to affect your security, but, you know, if this is a gaming system, then it might not be that big of a deal. I would judge that for yourself, and if you're happy with the performance that you get with VBS turned on, then it is worth keeping on. However, I am going to show you how to turn it off, and it's actually really easy. So let's go to the system right here, and I'll show you how to do it. Okay, so all you have to do is come down, click on your start button, and type in Core Isolation, and go ahead and click on this. And then once this opens, you'll see right here where it says memory integrity. You flip this to off, go ahead and hit yes to the security warning, and then you have to restart the computer for it to take effect. And that's all it takes to turn VBS off. Once you do that, you should be able to have your games at pretty much Windows 10 performance, which I guess isn't saying much. Now, while I can't say that Windows 11 is the best Windows ever for gaming, there are some features in Windows 11, at least some upcoming features, that I think are really going to change the game when it comes to gaming in Windows. One of those is Auto HDR. Now, unfortunately, I don't have an HDR monitor, so I can't test that feature. In fact, the most common comment I get about my monitor is that 2010 called and want their monitor back. And you know, I kind of agree. My monitor's a little old, so we definitely need to upgrade that soon so we can actually test out the Auto HDR feature. The next feature isn't actually out yet in Windows 11, and that's Direct Storage. Direct Storage kind of changes the way the operating system communicates with an NVMe drive, and it should change the game when it comes to open world games and pretty much anything when it comes to load times. However, That's not available in Windows yet, but it will be soon. But even if it was, we don't have games yet to support it. So there's really no sense in it being out right now anyway. So that should change the game once the time comes for us to actually be able to experience it. So Windows 11 is not the best Windows for gaming ever, but it might be someday. However, it's definitely not the worst either. It's very comparable to Windows 10. In fact, it's indistinguishable in many cases. So, should you upgrade to Windows 11? Well, I'm still going to stick with my original recommendation from my last video. No, I don't think you should upgrade to Windows 11. I don't think there's any benefit right now. And unless you're forced to upgrade, like you bought a new computer, then there really isn't any reason to do it. I would still stick with Windows 10. But there might be a reason to upgrade to Windows 11 in the future, so definitely keep that in mind. But for right now, I'd stick with Windows 10 and enjoy your gaming exactly the same as you would in Windows 11 anyway. So if this was helpful to you, then please like this video. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that bell icon so you can be notified of future videos. I post a new video every week. And hey, before you go, check out a couple of these videos. Have a great day.